إن في الجنة نهرا من لبن.
And these are profound philosophical problems that the human species is confronted with, and the tools to combat them are intellectual tools and spiritual tools. And in a sense, the Muslims don't differentiate between the intellect and the spirit. Intellectus is an excellent word in English because it comes from a Latin word which means to discriminate between things. And the two things that you're supposed to discriminate between is haqq and batil, true and false, right and wrong. This is the essence of the intellect. And in Arabic there are several words for intellect. One of them is furqan, which is intellectus. It means the same thing. It's yufarriqu bayna al-haqqi wal-batil. And the Quran itself is called al-furqan. So it's the means by which you discriminate between truth and falsehood. This was one of the great gifts that Umar ibn al-Khattab was given. He was called al-Faruq because of his incredible intellect. Allah gave him an extraordinary intellect. And the Prophet ﷺ was surrounded with brilliant human beings. These were intellectual lights that the world has never had, I don't think, in human history, has never had a group of human beings that came together at the same time. He gave you victory with his nasr and also with these believers that he put amongst you. So he was given these extraordinary people that were gifted with great intellectual and spiritual gifts. And so Imam al-Ghazali recognized that the crisis is a crisis of understanding. This is why he began his book, the Ihya Ulumuddin, is 40 books. And it's based on the idea of the ribat. The ribat, there's a hadith that says, "Ar-ribatu arba'una yawma." The ribat is 40 days. And so 40 is a sacred number. Musa alayhi salam was given 40 days to prepare for his meeting with his Lord. So 40 is one of the sacred numbers in Islam. And for this reason you have the cycle that the traditional scholars used to do was to read the book with an understanding of that, the 40. And some scholars actually read it every 40 days for many, many years. And I actually knew a scholar, Sheikh Ali Balfaqih, and I know that Habib Ali met him also. I actually was fortunate to study the Ihya with him in a gathering. He was a blind man, he was a Yemeni, but he pretty much memorized the book. I mean, he could complete sentences when we would read with him. He'd read it so many times that he just had that familiarity with it. The first book, though, it ends with the book of death, because that's where everything ends. But the first book is the book of knowledge. And this is a book where Imam al-Ghazali makes it very clear that knowledge is not exoteric knowledge. That outward knowledge is necessary, but it is not the essence of knowledge. It's not the purpose of knowledge. And he called the people to get trapped in literalism, to get trapped in what he called formalism. He called them mutarassimun, the formalists, the people that were trapped in the rusum, the descriptions of things, and didn't understand what the meaning of it was. And this is a problem because one of the forms of idolatry that manifests, and you have to remember that shaitan is very subtle. Shaitan has many, many tricks in his playbook. And one of the tricks that he does is that if he cannot get open shirk, he will find many, many ways to get hidden shirk. And one of the hidden shirks of our community is when they make the actual practice of Islam a type of idol, so that Islam itself becomes an idol. And William Cantwell Smith wrote a book, The End of a Religion, and showed how at the early period of Islam, he uses Islam as a case study, but he showed at the early period of Islam, the obsession of the Muslims was with Iman. And he shows in word count throughout the ages how the dominant focus of the early Muslims was Iman. And as time progressed, the Iman went down and the focus became Islam until the 19th and 20th century. Iman gets obliterated, and Islam, everybody is just talking about Islam. And this becomes the dominant focus of discussion, Islam, as opposed to Iman. And so this is something he showed. So Imam al-Ghazali understood that Islam was a shell that you need, but it's there to protect. Just like the shell is not the purpose of the fruit. You need the shell. The shell is necessary. And we don't break the shell until we leave this world. But once you leave this world, Islam is over. Right? Islam is the Sharia is for this world. It's not for the next world. But the mahabba, the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, these things, they're retained into the next world. You move into the next world, and your faith becomes a reality. It becomes yaqeen. وَعْبُدْ رَبَّكَ حَتَّى يَأْتِيكَ الْيَقِينَ. Worship your Lord until yaqeen comes to you. And that's what happens when you die if you're a believer in this life. Because belief is the evidence of unseen things. Iman is evidence of unseen things. It's recognizing that the material realm is not the realm that is reality. The material realm. Materialists believe this is all there is. They're like the twins in the womb. Some of you have seen this. They're like the twins in the womb, and one asks the other, "Do you believe in mom?" And the twin replies to the other one, "There's no proof for mom. Nobody's ever seen mom." He says, "Well, what about like the umbilical cord? Where'd that come from? Where do we get all this?" "No, that's just the way things are." And he says, "Well, do you believe in life after birth?" He says, "There's no life after birth. Nobody's ever seen that." Right? This is the way the atheist is in this world. He's like that fetus in the womb that thinks this is all there is. This is just a big womb, and we're going to leave this womb. Right? That's all the world is. It's a birthing place, and we're supposed to mature just like the fetus grows in the womb. We're supposed to spiritually grow in this world. And Allah has given us this umbilicus of faith, the hablullah. You know, they call the habl sirri. That's what they call the umbilicus. It's called the habl. And Allah has given us the Quran as our hablullah. That's the umbilicus of spiritual sustenance. That's where you grow spiritually. And then when you die, that's your birthing. You leave the world. One of the great sages said that you come into the world crying because you've left the unseen. You come into the world crying, and everybody around you is filled with joy. And he said you leave the world shouting a shout of joy, and everyone around you is crying. What have we ever lost by dying? Right? So this is the world we're living in, is a world in which ignorance now feigns as knowledge. Materialism now presents itself as the end-all. That science is the only thing, this empirical science, material science is the only thing, that metaphysics is hogwash. That there's no truth to metaphysics, there's no truth to revelation. There's no truth to these statements that cannot be measured in the world. And we reject that. So, the Prophet ﷺ was the only thing he was commanded to ask for increase in the whole Quran. The only thing is knowledge. Allah could have had him say, "Qur Rabbi zidni tawakkulan, Qur Rabbi zidni imanan, Qur Rabbi zidni ihsana, Qur Rabbi zidni shaja'atan, Qur Rabbi zidni ridan, mahabbatan." All those beautiful things, Allah could have commanded the Prophet to ask for increase in them. And they would have been good things to ask for increase. But the only thing he was commanded to ask for increase in the Quran, قُلْ رَبِّ زِدْنِي عِلْمًا. Increase me in knowledge. Why? Because all of those other things flow from knowledge. If you have knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, true knowledge, ma'rifah of Allah, you will be patient. You will be content. You will have trust in Allah. Imam al-Ghazali put in the Ihya, tawakkul with tawheed. The book on Tawheed is also the book of Tawakkul, because he understood that if you really understand Tawheed, you will have trust in Allah. You will have no fear. You won't fear the ending of the world, because the world is in Allah's hands. If He enables the kuffar to do what they do, He has enabled them. It's all enablement. He enables them to do obedience or disobedience. If it's obedience, we call it tawfiq. If it's disobedience, we call it khidlan. These are the two things. Allah gives us enough rope to save ourselves and enough rope to hang ourselves. And we choose. We choose. Right? كُلُّ إِنسَانٍ بَائِعٌ نَفْسَهُ. Everybody sells their soul. You sell your soul. You either sell it to the demons or you sell it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. إِنَّ اللَّهَ اشْتَرَى مِنَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَمْوَالَهُم بِأَنَّ لَهُمُ الْجَنَّةِ. He bought from the believers their lives. But that purchase, Allah allows you to enter into that transaction with Him. It's a free transaction. And so, part of what we're trying to do is to reestablish an intellectual framework to understand our religion, but also to understand the time we're living in, the place we're living. So we have Arabic is central to the curriculum. People learn Arabic. We have Islamic studies. Obviously, that's at the center and the heart of the teaching. But like in the Muslim past, and this is something John Walbridge, if you're interested in reading more about this, John Walbridge wrote, I think, a very important work, which is The Caliphate of Reason. It's about the centrality of logic in the history of Islamic studies. Imam al-Ghazali wrote 7 books on logic, 7, for different levels of understanding and also for different sciences. He wrote a 40-page introduction to his famous Mustasfa on logic in order for Usuli scholars to understand how to reason properly. And logic was one of the most important subjects in the Islamic world. It's still studied in some of the traditional madrasas. It's not studied to the degree that's really necessary for it to be beneficial. It's more formalist training now, so people study it but don't really learn to apply it like they should. Mauritania still studies logic. My own teacher was a master of logic, Murabt al-Hajj, and Shaykh Abdullah bin Bayya. This is one of his areas of mastery. He mastered traditional logic, and he's constantly reasoning in that way. And he's an incredibly formidable. He doesn't debate, but whenever he presents his arguments, he presents them in the most formidable way because he understands how to argue. We used to have a science called Adab al-Bahth wal-Munadhara, which is the comportment or the courtesies of engaging in discussion and debate. And now we have Muslims arguing on the internet, fighting. They don't know any of these things. And the ulama in Al-Azhar considered it fard kifaya. It was considered an obligation, if you were going to enter into discussions and debates, to learn this science. Because there's ways to discuss things so that you don't end up hating each other or calling each other names. And there's ways of proving whether an argument is valid or invalid. So that's very important in the curriculum. And then it's related to the trivium, which are the language sciences. We call them in Arabic, they were called al-sina'at al-thalath, the 3 arts. And art is a word that we get our root, in Latin it means power. That's where we get army from, arsenal. And art is a craft, and Kraft in German means power. Right? It's a military term in German. So, because as you know, English is a hybrid language from the Latin and Greek and these Germanic languages. So it has some of its roots go back to the Anglo-Saxon, and others go back to the Greek and Latin. But the arts are skills that are acquired, and one of the most important skills is communication. When you don't have communication skills, things break down. Language is a vehicle for communicating, just like you have a car. And when you learn to drive a car, that's learning how to talk. I mean, to use the analogy, when you learn how to drive a car, now you can drive a car well, or you can be reckless in your driving. When you're reckless, you endanger others. Communication can be reckless also. When people speak without thinking. When people haven't really reasoned their arguments, when people haven't thought through things, when people don't have proof for what they say, when people make judgments before they understand. And so communication skills are extremely important. Language is important. Grammar is important. One of the things about texting is we're reducing a whole civilization to an idiotic level of communication. If you look at text now, people don't use any grammar. It's the most basic communication. It's like chimpanzees communicate. And this is a very dangerous sign, because people will be habituated to communicating like this. And over time, this is how people will end up speaking. Language will be reduced to rubble. And it's happening before your eyes. If you don't think it's not happening, it is happening. Language, the ancient peoples in the most simple civilizations had very, very complicated languages. We have lost in English many of the subtleties of the English language. We used to have the dual. Just like Arabic has the dual, we used to have the dual. It's a very important concept to understand the concept of pairing, because existence is dualistic, it's dyadic. Sama wal ard, dunya wa akhirah, dhakar wa untha, fawq wa taht. This is the nature of the world, is dualistic. So the dual in a language is very important, and most languages have the dual, but they lose them over time because they lose their cosmologies. We used to have a plural of you, like Arabic say anta, antum, anti, antunna. We used to have that in English. You'd say you and ye. Hear ye, hear ye. That was the plural, antum. That's gone. We used to have I and thou. Right? All these things are lost now. And even though English is still, like I said, it is an extremely gifted language. It's a powerful language. It's a beautiful language. It has its own beauty. And anybody who's studied English literature and poetry will realize that. But it takes time. You have to study it. I was teaching my son the other day some Arabic grammar, and I was teaching him the pluperfect tense, because Arabic, the tenses are not like in English. In English we have more, the tenses are defined more specifically. Whereas in Arabic you have to say them using kana. And I was explaining to him about the pluperfect, where you know, I had eaten, or I had prayed, and explaining that the difference between continuous perfect and how you say that in Arabic. So the Arabs will say like قد كان قد صلى, right? He had prayed. And so he said, well, what's the purpose of that? Like, well, why do you need that? And I said, well, if I say I came home and Yahya had prayed, right? Is that the same as saying I came home and Yahya was praying? Right? It's a different meaning. And if you don't learn grammar, you won't know the subtleties of subtle communication. You won't be able to understand things in subtle ways. It will all be simplistic. It will all be reduced to trivialities. And that's why grammar is important. Right? Grammar is important. Commas are important in the English language. They're important. Misplaced modifiers, if you don't know what they are, you're victims of them. People don't like this stuff. They say, I never liked grammar, because they don't understand the importance of language and what communication is. If you understand what communication is, I mean, I've been the victim of misunderstanding so many times because people don't know English. And I studied English. And it's a problem when you're out speaking. It used to be people that didn't know a language, they just knew they were ignorant. But now everybody thinks they know. And this is what the Prophet said, that towards the end of time he said, إِعْجَابُ كُلِّ ذِي رَأْيٍ بِرَأْيِهِ. Every opinionated person would be amazed at his opinions. Just look at the internet. And what's interesting on the internet is, if you ever scroll down and read comments, intelligent comments are always written with grammatically correct language. And stupid comments are always misspelled and poorly written. I mean, I'm not making that up. Just look on people can't even spell. And you've got an opinion? You know, go study, learn, have an educated opinion. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. But do the work necessary to have an opinion. Because in Islam, not everybody's entitled to their opinion. In the public space, we don't want this kind of democratic environment where everybody can say what they want. No. هَلْ يَسْتَوِيَ الَّذِينَ يَعْلَمُونَ وَالَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Are they the same, those who know and those who don't know? Are they the same? Are they equal? Allah is asking that question. Are they equal? If you put in the time to learn, you will be honored. But if you don't put in the time, then you should just keep your mouth silent. Imam Ali was asked, how long does it take you to know a man? He said, if he speaks, immediately. And if he doesn't, it takes me about a day. Just observing him. Imam Malik was walking with a man, he asked him about a hadith. He said, I had a higher opinion of you before this. You know, that he would ask about a hadith walking. Because Imam Malik, he wouldn't even give hadith until he took a ghusl, he put the bakhur in. They said his face, the color of his face used to change when the Prophet ﷺ's name was mentioned. It's a different caliber of human being. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, the great scholar who relates the Muwatta. And there are many people that related the Muwatta. Yahya ibn Yahya al-Laythi, why is he honored over the other transmitters? Because many great scholars transmitted. He was not the greatest scholar. But why is he had tawfiq from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he came from Andalusia to study with Malik, they were sitting in the majlis and somebody came in and said, oh, there's an elephant has come in the caravan. And everybody left the majlis except Yahya bin Yahya al-Laythi. You know, humans curious. Right? That's what, like now, have you seen that latest YouTube? That's like the elephant. Just shaitan just distract people. Yahya ibn Yahya, he was the last one. He was sitting there. Imam Malik looked at him. He said, aren't you going to go see هذا الخلق العجيب? You're not going to see this wondrous creation? He said, I didn't come all the way from Andalusia to look at elephants. He said, I came to take from men. ما أتيت من الأندلس لأرى الأفيال أتيت ليأخذ عن الرجال. I mean, that's focus. And Imam Malik made a dua for him. People get distracted. So that's why it's important to learn these. And then rhetoric is learning how to be most effective in your articulation of whatever's in your heart. One of the most beautiful things ever said about a good education is Augustine, the Algerian Christian. He said, my education enabled me to never read anything that I couldn't understand. I could read anything that was written, I could understand whatever I read, and I could say what was ever in my heart. That is somebody who has mastered language. And that's why the Muslims were so focused on this. And the Prophet ﷺ spoke beautiful Arabic. Beautiful. He was the most eloquent of people. And his Sahaba spoke beautiful Arabic. Most of them were accomplished poets. All of the major Sahaba have diwans. Imam Ali has a diwan. Sayyidina Umar has a diwan. Abu Bakr wrote poetry. Aisha was a great rawiya of poetry. And if you want to know the literary level of the Prophet's household, then just read the hadith of Zara. And you'll see the literary level of the household of the Prophet ﷺ. It's an amazing hadith. And then also the quadrivium, because the nature of knowledge is two. You have quality and quantity. Quality is language, quantity is number. We have literacy and numeracy. And you need numerate societies. You need people that understand, because especially in this age, we're being manipulated with statistics, with numbers all the time. And so understanding these two are very important, to have a qualitative education and a quantitative education. Historically, when in the Muslim world and in other worlds, when you finished a mastery of these subjects, then you went on to study in 3 schools. They had the school in the Muslim world, they had the school of studying fiqh, sharia, theology. And then in the, so you had people that focused on these Islamic sciences. And then you had the people that studied medicine. And the people that studied theology and what came to be known as tasawwuf, what we would call today psychology, spiritual psychology. Tasawwuf really is psychology. It's understanding the nature of the soul, how to treat the soul. Just like you have psychiatrists in the material world, they think that the foundation of all these diseases are material, chemical imbalances in the brain, so they're going to fix the chemical imbalances with medicine. the Muslims understood that many of these diseases are actually rooted in the spirit. Depression is often a spiritual disease. There can be, obviously, it's a chicken-egg problem. What comes first, the chemical imbalance or the depression? But we know that there are many things that can treat depression. We have many du'as to treat depression. My own teacher, there's something called bilateral therapy, which is walking treatments. My own teacher, many years ago, told me Arab proverb, al-harwalatu dawa'un la yukhti, that brisk walking is a cure that will never fail. And there's actually walking therapy. It's a type of therapy that some practitioners use in treating mental patients and people with mental problems. Going out in nature and walking. And it's very healing. But that same teacher that told me that, 20 years after he told me that, he was diagnosed with diabetes. And they wanted to give him pills, and he's very cautious about taking things that he doesn't know what's in them. And so he said, I'm fine. He started walking 5 miles every day. And his blood sugar went down. A few years ago, I was with a Saudi Arabian businessman who is very concerned about the incredible rate of diabetes in Saudi Arabia. And I'm going to talk about this later, acidosis, and why we're becoming acidic in terms of our physiology and why the earth is becoming acidic. But he was very concerned, so he had one of the top experts, endocrinologist from University of California at San Francisco, who's considered one of the top experts on diabetes, and the UCSF is one of the major centers for the study of diabetes. And I was in the room, we were in Berkeley at the Claremont Hotel, and he asked the physician, he said, what is the most cutting edge treatment for type 2 diabetes? And he said to the man, he said, Khalid, I'm going to tell you, but you're not going to believe me. He said, no, I want. He said, walking 10,000 steps every day. He said, that is the best thing that you can do for type 2 diabetes. He said, if you do that every day, you'll see the blood sugar will normalize. People are taking in too much carbohydrate, they're not exercising, they're getting sick. And the reason why they study these is because you have two types of sickness. You have sickness of the body and sickness of the soul. And that's why the two areas of interest in pre-modern civilization, the two areas of interest, theology, spiritual psychology, law, and so that all relates to the sacred, and then the body, the physical body. Law treats the illnesses of the society, theology and spiritual psychology treat the illnesses of the soul, and medicine treats the illness of the physical body. And this is how you have a healthy society, when you have these three areas of knowledge that are constantly being studied, explored, developed, improved, renewed. This is how you change. Alhamdulillah, we have the faculty now, we have a full-time faculty. We're waiting for some talented sisters to come on board full-time, inshallah. Too many men teaching. Men have one way of viewing things, you know. You need, there's a reason why Allah made us in pairs. You need the two. And the Prophet ﷺ, his wives were geniuses. He had amazing wives, and they gave him advice, and I mean, Aisha, if you study the history of Aisha, just an extraordinary human being. So, this is our adjunct, and I think Ali Attai, you're getting to know him. Very gifted young, maybe not so young. No, he is. He just premature gray. Like, I got it when it's supposed to come, but his was... My mom's 93 this year, and her hair's turning black. I mean, it's going back to, like, she's losing all her gray hair. You're telling her, subhanAllah. I met a man, really a saint in Medina many years ago, he was 100 and 3 when I met him. And he had a 3rd set of teeth. So there's hope for those of you who have lost some teeth. He had a 3rd set of teeth came in. They were like baby teeth. They were amazing. We have right now, I think there's 48. There's some attrition. Most colleges have 50% attrition rate. So, you know, people, other things come up. People get distracted, or they're not interested, or they lose interest. And there's a lot of reasons why people leave. And then this is Wahid's here. We got Colleen Keyes, amazing, very gifted administrator from, she came from a college on the East Coast. She was a dean at a college on the East Coast. So she's really helped us a lot by bringing in, she had a lot of knowledge that we really didn't have. There's no How to Start a College for Dummies out there, or I would have read it. So
You're not dumb.
huh?
You're not dumb.
Well, you know, see, everybody's dumb in some things. I mean, I'm like, you know, mentally handicapped in certain things. I mean, my wife can do these things that I can't do all the time. I'm just amazed. And then computer stuff, it's just, I've learned basic things, so I'm not completely a techno peasant. That's what they call those people. So, alhamdulillah, we got BPE recognition, which means the state of California recognizes us as a postgraduate, post-secondary institution that is legally within the state of California. It recognizes us as being able to issue diplomas. This is not accreditation, though. It's a type of recognition that's a first stage in the stage of accreditation. We're getting accredited with what's known as the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, which is the highest accrediting body. It's considered the gold standard on the West Coast, which means that we will be able to, when we get that accreditation, Canadian citizens, we can get them residency. They could apply anywhere in the world, foreign students. It also enables you to get financial aid from the government, but we've chosen not to do that because it comes with a lot of stipulations, and religious colleges that want to attain their religious integrity. I was happy to see that Canada, they allowed this Christian law school here. I mean, I thought that was good, because a religious school should have the right to not allow people that have a completely different set of moral values to say that they're being discriminated against if they don't want to hire them, or if they find out that they're doing something that they would consider immoral, that they fire them. And so this is going to be one of the major it's going to be one of the major issues of your lifetimes for you young people. It's not going to go away, and Muslims should understand it and understand the time we're living in, the complications of the time. One of the things that the Jahili people did is they always framed their sinfulness. They always framed it in higher values. It's a quality of Jahiliyyah. And so the Jahili Arabs, when they buried their children alive, just like abortion here, it's determined a right of a woman, that she has a right over her body. In a secular state, there's secular law, and that's what the Supreme Court in the Roe v. Wade in the United States, I don't know here if it went to your Supreme Court or what happened in Canada. Is it similar to what happened in America? Because abortion's legal in Canada, right? But did it go to the Supreme Court here? Anyway, in the United States, it went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court voted. And the argument is that the fetus doesn't really have a right. It's more like a parasite, and the woman has a right to determine for her body, what she does with it. In Islamic law, the child, and it's funny that when they abort them, they call them a fetus, but when they take them to term, they call them a baby. How's the baby doing? Nobody says, how's the fetus doing? You know, but when it's aborted, they call it a fetus. Anyway, that's framed in a that it's a right. Whereas from a Christian, a Muslim perspective, it's not a right. Even in the Hippocratic Oath, I mean, even the pagans of Greece, one of the things that in the Hippocratic Oath, they had to take an oath, every physician had to take an oath not to abort a child. So even the pagans of Greece understood the enormity of aborting a child. So, anyway, and then, so we're having the new class matriculated this year, 2016. That's our revenue. We have, alhamdulillah, the graduating class has been able to, we have memorandums of understanding so they can actually, despite the fact that we're not accredited yet, some colleges have recognized us. And so they're accepting our students into graduate studies. So our students have been accepted, even though the BA degree that we give is not fully accredited, but they recognize the merit of the curriculum and the caliber of the teachers. So they're accepting our students. So that's a good sign. And we recently had a visit by the Vice President of the Western Association of Schools and Colleges who does the accrediting. And he was extremely impressed. He wrote a very nice email about the visit, and he just felt that we were, he said, surprisingly very far ahead of what a lot of colleges that start out where they would be at the same time. He said that we were really at an advanced level, so that was very encouraging. And we've applied for eligibility, and so the WASC will come sometime next year. And then we begin the candidacy. And there's a fast track, so it's possible that it could be accredited within 2 years. That would be best case scenario. And this is our main campus. People don't know this yet because we kind of kept it a secret, but we're closing escrow in 2 weeks on a second campus, which is right next door to this one. It's a Christian college that came up for sale, and we couldn't really resist it because it's going to enable it has dormitories for the women. It's a very safe area. It's a very beautiful, architecturally, it's a very beautiful building. So it's consistent with our commitment to presenting Islam as a beautiful thing, because Muslims, wherever they went, they always made their cultures beautiful. Their clothes were beautiful, their food was beautiful, their buildings and architecture were beautiful, but most beautiful of all, always, was the calligraphed word, because they saw the beauty of language, and so there's nothing to compare to Arabic calligraphy, as far as I'm concerned. And the beauty of the architecture of their mosques and their madrasas. The colleges were stunningly beautiful buildings in any culture that you go to. So this is the hallmark of Muslims, is that they were muhsinun, people that make things beautiful. And that's what we need to restore in our community. And a lot of our women still dress beautifully, I think. I think the men, really, especially the shabab, need to stop wearing underwear in public. T-shirts are underwear. They're not meant to be worn. And Muslims historically would have never done those things because they understood what a caliph is, so they always had clothes that represented the caliphate. They always wore beautiful clothes. Men wore beautiful clothes, always. Even the Egyptian peasant with his galabiya and his sadriya. Amazing. You know, just look how peasants in the Muslim world dress. They dress like princes. And now we have princes dressing like peasants. Any questions? Any answers?
Just a clarification.
Uh-huh.
3 arts, communication,
Uh-huh.
and then...
Oh, in the 3 arts of communication. In Arabic it was an-nahu wa-sarf. Yeah, and then the sana'at al-thalath, yeah, al-nahw al-sarf, and then mantiq and balagha. Those were the three. And nahw and sarf ensure that you don't make mistakes in your syntax, the way you speak, and in your word elocution, how you pronounce words. And then the mantiq was to make sure that you didn't make mistakes in your thinking processes, because the mind has certain shortcomings. For instance, we make hasty generalizations. It's part of the mind. We're quick to make generalizations. People do it all the time. Somebody meets three people from a certain country and have bad experiences, and they assume that all people from that country are like that. It's very common. And that's what logic does. It protects you. Formal logic enables you to make sound arguments. Material logic enables you to make sure that the content of the arguments is also valid.
General sense of where this graduating class will be going?
What schools?
Fields.
Yeah, you know, that's important. Is what we want the students to do. I mean, obviously we want them to do what they want, and one of the nice things about our culture is that people do have choices, especially if we're fortunate enough to come from circumstances that enable us to go to schools and learn things. The purpose of a liberal education, and liberal here does not mean like politically liberal. Like Muslims think liberal arts is, you know, they're going to be Democrats when they graduate and they'll know how to weave baskets. Right? That's not the point of the liberal arts. It's not a vocational training. Vocational training is like a professional skill, something that you learn, like mechanics. Those are servile arts. They're learned because you're going to do something that serves the society. The liberal arts are arts that are studied because they're ends in and of themselves. They're contemplative arts. They enable you to think at a deeper level. And in that way they're not vocational. And so the end result is that you will be a creative, your mind will be trained to think more creatively. And so the areas that you can go into are many. The college curriculum that we have is an ideal curriculum for a pre-law. Like you have pre-med, this is an ideal pre-law. If you take these 4 years, you will go into law school and not have any difficulty in law school. I'm absolutely positive of that. It's an excellent program for Islamic studies. It's a good program because the writing skills are very important, and we focus a lot on vocabulary and writing. So it's a good program for people that want to go into writing. We need filmmakers. I mean, I'm not big on the whole image-based society that's been created, but it's a reality. It's not going away. We need filmmakers. This is the golden age of documentaries. You know, they have this golden age of film. Like in Egypt, it was in the 1930s and 40s. This is the golden age of documentaries. There are some incredible documentaries being made, and there's some really good documentarians out there. And we need Muslims to tell our stories, and to we need. I mean, we've got a lot of engineers. Like, I mean, I think if all the Muslim engineers refused to practice engineering, there would be a major crisis on the planet. It would probably be a really good thing. And then we have a lot of doctors, and I would like to see more Muslim doctors. I mean, why do the Hindus have so many, like Deepak Chopra and Sanjay Gupta? You know, I mean, there's Mehmet Oz. You know, like, I'm not going to rag on Mehmet Oz. You know, I'm not. But, you know, I mean, it's good to normalize Muslims, and people do know he's a Muslim, but he's, like he said, you know, he drinks a little wine, and so But we really need Muslims to be, I think, at the forefront of some of the other medical avenues. The allopathic is not the only way to treat things, that there are other ways to treat things. I'd like to see more Muslims go into naturopathic, and they could do an MD, and then there's some colleges, there's some good medical schools that are starting to incorporate different modalities, and it's good to look and see where those colleges are. So at least you're not, it's not ridiculed. And
Alaikum salam. Would you be able to open up other campuses maybe outside of California?
So the question is, would we open up other campuses outside of California? We started an online program on Saturdays, which is an honors program, so anybody can log on to that and streamline. It's streamlined. There's no cost for it, and we're doing traditional mutun. So that it's an honors program at Zaytuna, but it's open to anybody that wants to study the traditional scholastic texts of our intellectual tradition. And but right now we're just trying to really, one of the reasons why things don't succeed is because they overextend themselves. If you've ever read Khalid Blankenship's The End of the Jihad State, he makes a very strong argument that the Umayyad dynasty imploded because they just overextended themselves. They conquered too much land too quickly, and then they couldn't hold it. And so we don't want to make the mistake of the Umayyads. I'd rather be like the Abbasids, slow and easy. Slow and steady wins the race. Go ahead, yeah. Alaikum assalam.
We've been inspired with your lecture, but I have a question. Can you address to those Muslims who believe that they can get knowledge from watching YouTube videos? Because most YouTube videos are from conferences and they're very general and tactic. And I personally also believe that I'll get good Islamic knowledge from watching those YouTube videos. And I believe I'm not the only one. So can you address that? Yeah, bismillah. I mean, for those who didn't hear that over here about, like, can you get knowledge from these YouTube videos? And in our tradition, real knowledge is painfully acquired. It's through study, particularly texts, and obviously the goal is to get to a point where you can study the primary text. At the end of Imam al-Ghazali's life, he could not read books written by people. He could only read Quran and Hadith. He wasn't capable. He just couldn't. It was like, for him, his self got constricted when he read other people's words. And that's a very high maqam to get to. But really the Quran and the Hadith are the highest. But they're written, the Quran is extraordinarily subtle. Many mistakes can be made. I was recently reading a commentary by a modern Muslim arguing that because the Quran says that for the imam, their punishment is half of what a free woman's punishment who commits adultery is. And the word in the Quran is muhsanat, which means married generally. And so he was arguing, how could you have half of stoning? And that proves that there's no stoning in Islam. That's a classic example of somebody who's not trained in, in logic. You have what's called, we have a science in our tradition called the ilm al-wada', which is the science of supposition. It's how words mean things in different contexts. And in that particular verse, the word muhsanat doesn't mean a married woman. It means a Muslim woman. And it's very clear because it begins by saying ankih al-mu'minat al-muhsanat. Marry the believing muhsanat. How can you marry a woman who's already married? So the word is not being used there, even though it normally means muhsana. In that actual verse it doesn't. So there's an example of somebody who was not qualified to make a tafsir, and he can lead a lot of people astray. by that. The rajm in Islam is established by prophetic sunnah. It's mutawatir. It was practiced by the 4 khulafa al-Rashideen. And anybody that says it's not part of Islam is denying something that is part of Islam. And their iman is in a dangerous situation. It's almost impossible to prove adultery. During the Prophet's time, it was all through confession. There was no actual testimonies. And we know that the sunnah is to veil people. Somebody came to the Prophet and confessed to adultery, and he turned away. He didn't want to even hear it. And then until she did it 4 times, and then he had her stoned. Another situation, Abu Bakr, a man came to Abu Bakr and confessed, and Abu Bakr said, "Did you tell anybody?" He said, "No." And he said, "Get out of here." Then he went to Omar. He said, "Did you tell anybody?" He said, "I told Abu Bakr." He said, "What did he say?" He said, "Don't tell anybody." He said, "Then why are you telling me?" And he said, "Listen to what he said." And it was still bothering the man. And then he went to the Prophet ﷺ. These people were real deep believers. They would rather be punished in this world than risk the fire in the next world. It's a different worldview. And that iman, that level of iman is just hard to imagine for modern people. But these were, Abu Bakr al-Tartushi mentions an amazing hadith about Umar ibn al-Khattab, an athar, in which he caught somebody stealing. And he said, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, huwa awwalu marra. It's the first time. He said, "You're a liar. Allah never exposes anybody the first time they do something sinful." And then he said, "As-saraqta qul la." He said, "Did you steal? Say no." And the man said, "La." And he said, "Ruh, anta dharif. Get out of here, you're a smart guy." And Abu Bakr al-Tartushi said that he was giving him a makhraj. In another one, some of the Sahaba chased a man who was drunk. And he fled into the house of Al-Abbas. And Al-Abbas, they knocked on the door, and Abbas opened the door, and he said that we were chasing this drunk man, and he fled into your house. He said, "Get out of here, you're crazy." He was veiling him. That's the way they were. They weren't these people that wanted people to be punished. This sick mentality that some of these modern Muslims have is just so perverse. It was about sitr, it was about veiling people. In this culture, in the 1950s, even in the early 60s, if a woman got pregnant, she just disappeared. And they'd say, "Oh, she went to her aunt's or something." She would have the baby. The baby would usually then be raised by the grandparents, or that's the way they did it, or put up for adoption, something. And then nobody would talk about it. That's the way Muslims were. These are societies of sitr, of covering people's faults. So this whole idea that people, but we've lost, just to the AIDS, we've lost millions of people, millions, to the AIDS epidemic, which is directly related to promiscuity. Whether heterosexual or homosexual, it's promiscuity. If any physician, and I know how many physicians in this room? There's enough. Any physician in this room, I guarantee you, they will tell you that if you are in a monogamous relationship and you do not sleep around, and neither of you had venereal diseases when you came into the relationship, you will not get any venereal diseases as long as you're married, unless you start doing things that are haram. Because the most dangerous, according to the World Health Organization, the most dangerous sexual practice is a sexual practice that's being heavily promoted today. And physicians know this. They should talk about it. They should talk about the cancers that come from it. They should talk about the incontinence that comes from it, incontinence to stool. They should talk about incontinence to wind. And these are all problems that come. They should talk about, they should tell people about the public health issues. But this is the culture that we're living in, where smoking cigarettes is condemned, eating fat food is condemned because they're health problems. They endanger your health. Nobody is going to die from eating one Big Mac. Maybe they might choke on it, but they're not going to die from arteriosclerosis. They will if they eat a lot of Big Macs, but not from one. But people can die from one deviant sexual practice. Just one time. That's all it takes, and they can die from it. So we've got a society warning people about eating high-risk foods, and they're not really doing the type of public service that they need to warn people about high-risk sexual behavior. Anyway, it's one of the many contradictions of a Jahili culture. Go ahead, yeah. Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
So I've got to mention the importance of filmmaking and the creatives. I'm an aspiring.
Okay.
And I'm just curious to know, actually, because you talked about imagery, you slightly hinted.
Yeah.
So you hinted about imagery, and I wanted to know
about what?
About imagery, like
imagery.
Like, yes.
Yeah.
And I wanted to know more your thoughts on this. Just I'm curious to know about your perspective.
Well, I mean, I am increasingly inclining towards the prohibition of images, which was the original position of most of the ulama in the late 19th century when all this stuff first emerged. I can understand the wisdom now behind it because we've entered into a period where people they're just completely in an image-based culture. They're losing sense of reality. We're turning into these kind of autistic people that live in private worlds. One of the hadiths, the Prophet said, يا ابن مسعود من أشراطها أن تواصل الأطباق وتقاطع الأرحام. From the signs of the end of time, he said, the atbaq will be continuously maintained, and the kinship bonds will be severed. Now, traditionally, the ulama said, tawasul al-atbaq meant that people would just eat one plate after another. And I call one of my sheikhs, who I trust, to see what he thought about that interpretation, and he actually came to the same conclusion, so I was happy to know that. So, I really believe that refers to the satellite dishes, because the word that they use in the North African Arab countries for satellite dishes is atbaq. And the tabaq it's a concave dish. Whereas the suhoon, which is the word they use in the Eastern Arab countries, is a flat dish. So the tabaq is actually a better name. And then we call it muwasalat in Arabic. Muwasalat al-aqmar al-sana'iyya. The satellite communication. So the very word that the Prophet ﷺ used, tuwasalu, is the same word that's used for communications. And we have people now that watch continuously these satellite dishes, and they sever their kinship bonds. They don't visit people anymore. People come over, the TV's on. People don't talk like they used to. So these are all signs. But like I said, I think effective documentaries can be really, really useful tools for waking people up about certain things. Images are very powerful. I'm profoundly concerned about also the level of pornography. I was made aware of this because I used to talk about how bad it was in Western society, and one of these Muslims, a friend of mine, he came with all the statistics about Muslim societies, and I had no idea that this was a major problem in the Muslim countries. On Huffington Post this week, they had an article that there's a website, it's apparently the #1 website. I shouldn't even say the name because, I don't want anybody looking this up. But it's the #1 website for pornography. And they gave their stats. I don't know if they're exaggerated, but they presented them in the article as if they were valid stats. But they gave their stats, and they said that last year, for 2013, because this is the end of the year, for 2013 they had 14 billion downloads worldwide. 14 billion. 1.5 million downloads an hour. We have a really serious problem. And it's a very destructive. If you want to destroy your spiritual heart, that is the quickest way to do it. You will destroy your ability to have spiritual experiences. You will permanently and indelibly etch on your consciousness images that you will not be able to erase. We are not designed to look at that. When I was a young boy, they called people that watched other people in intimacy, peeping Toms. And in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Psychiatric Illnesses, it's actually considered a psychological illness. And yet we have a culture now in which this has become a norm. And it's become the brunt of jokes. Films are made about it. It's all a big joke. It's all fun and games. It's a very serious social disease. It's destroying the fabric of family and society. And it's real. And it has to be. And you know, I'm going to have husn al-ban about everybody in this room, but I know there are a lot of Muslims that are engaged in this activity, because the recent stats that came out, and I was sent this article because I'm involved in morality in the media, and I actually wrote an article for people remember I invited Pamela Paul up to the RIS conference. She wrote a book on it called Pornified, and she was also she partook in a seminar that I also delivered a paper at the Witherspoon Institute at Princeton University on the social costs of pornography. And it was a deeply troubling, for me, seminar. There was a neurologist there who gave a paper on what's called neuroplasticity and the effects of pornography on the brain. And what he argued was that people that watch pornography for any significant amount of time, their brains are actually rewired. They're rewired. And he also, and Pamela Paul found this consistent with her research as well, that long-term effects of pornography will also involve within heterosexual males homoerotic tendencies, so they actually begin to have homosexual impulses, because the brain, the way the brain works, it's a plastic, our brains are plastic, and the way the brain works is that if you're constantly being aroused with male images as well as female images, that they begin to arouse you. And so that's one of the things that can happen. The other thing is that consistently Pamela Paul found that people over 10-year periods of watching pornography began to watch pedophilic material. And so this should be a major concern for people, because we know that pedophilia is rife in our societies, and children are being abused, and these are the long-term effects of a society that indulges in the appetites. And the abyss of the human soul has no ends to darkness, has no ends. People can really reach great depths of depravity. Bestiality is something also that people seem to enjoy watching it. In a study in one of the Muslim countries, bestiality, 6% of the pornographic downloads were bestiality downloads in a Muslim country, according to these stats, if the stats are valid. But the Muslims per capita had higher rates of searches for pornography than Europe or America, per capita. So we have a problem, people. You know.
Assalamu alaikum. So Shaykh Hamza, sorry. Back here.
Go ahead.
I just have a quick question I have two questions actually. One is actually about the pornography, and I was just curious as to why it's so prevalent in the Muslim community, and if it has to do with the fact that we don't have healthy male-female relationships. And the second question is about Zaytuna College, and I was just wondering what's the approach you take to critical thinking in Zaytuna College in comparison to secular institutions? Okay. Particularly when it comes to the readings of traditional scholarship, like Imam Ghazali.
Yeah. Okay. First question. I think it's a good question. Like, why would it be more prevalent amongst Muslim, and obviously much more amongst males? Pornography is much more a male problem. Although increasingly we're seeing more women engaging in pornography as well. Oftentimes it's to appease, and one of the magazines that I read on a regular basis is called Scientific Mind, and they had an article recently in which they were arguing that it's healthier relationships when the two couples watch pornography together, as opposed to when the male is hiding it from the female. And these are the types of, and they had their little studies that they'd done showing, but this is obviously the type, it's being promoted One of the things that people should be aware of also is that many of the women that are in these films are actually slaves. These films are made in places like Philippines. I mean, if you study this thing, there's a lot of literature on this. So you're actually contributing to the total exploitation of human beings, objectified human beings. There's no empathy. Anybody that can take pleasure out of another person's pain and suffering is a sick human being, sick to the core of their being. I would say that obviously Muslims, there is an argument that the hijab, part of the hijab was actually to maintain a healthier relationship, because one of the things that happens in cultures where sexuality becomes open and prevalent is you get more and more depraved types of sexual behavior. So you have a lot of the sadomasochism, dominant matrix type. A lot of people hire people to whip them and things like that. So you get a lot of sickness when you have cultures that are so satiated with appetite that they need all this more and more perverse stimuli. So Muslims have cultures that traditionally there was a segregation, and obviously there's what would in modern Arabic is called kabt. There's obviously situations where you can have a lot of repression. And one of the things that happens with some of the cultures where there is a lot of that, when they come to the West, they go crazy. And we've seen this from certain countries. They get here and right off the plane they're in the discotheque, and so that's definitely, we need healthier relationships. Women need to be honored. Our tradition is to honor women. The Prophet said, "La yakrimuhunna illa kareem, wa la yuhinuhunna illa la'im." Honorable men will always honor women, and contemptible men will always degrade women. The Prophet said, "Khairukum khairukum li ahlihi, wa ana khairukum li ahli." The best of you are the best of you to your women folk, and I am the best of you to my women folk. The Prophet loved women, and not in any way that these Orientalists or people here assume. No, he loved the qualities of women. He loved their gentleness, the riqab, their hearts, all those things. So we have to honor women. And part of the hijab is not to objectify women, not to turn them into sexual beings that men take pleasure from. And the eye is a source of great pleasure. In fact, the eye is the source of the greatest pleasure, and that's why the greatest pleasure is the vision of God. And so the eye is, and the things that we're attracted to in this world, what are the appetites? The shahawat are food, drink, and munkih, and intimacy. And those are the pleasures of paradise. They're not equivalents. I mean, the worldly pleasures are not, Ibn Abbas said the only relationship is the names, but these are pale imitations of the delights of paradise that people are really after, if they understood. So it's real versus apparent goods. So I would say that that's part of the problem, is just the attitude that a lot of Muslim males have towards Muslim females. We have a tradition in which women were seen as intellectually inferior, and that's globally, even in this culture. And this is what in logic, you have something, where you define something, and you define it, in a way that's true, but it doesn't extend to all of the numbers of what's being defined. And so comprehension and extension in logic are two different things, and you need to differentiate between them. Men are stronger than women by comprehension, not by extension. There are many women that are stronger than men. But by comprehension, the male is stronger than the female. And in certain types of intellectual reasoning, by comprehension, men are stronger than women. In other ones, women are stronger than men. So women tend to have more facility with language skills. Men tend to be stronger in spatio reasoning skills. This has been proven in many, many studies, and there are many books about this. And there's arguments that this is just social constructs, and if you change the constructs, that will change. But there are many brilliant female mathematicians, and there are many, many gifted female literary scholars. So this idea that this is a blanket statement is one of the prejudices of the Muslim male mind in a lot of places, and that needs to be removed. Individuals should be judged based on their merit, and you can't lump everybody into one group. And then also, the hadith about the majority of women in hell, people in hell are women. I mean, that's a totally misunderstood hadith. And it's also, there's another hadith that Sakhawi relates that says the opposite, that the majority of inhabitants of paradise are women. And they're not mutually contradictory. And the Prophet wasn't talking about the kuffar. He was talking about Muslims. That kufran al-ishra is one of the main reasons why people go to hell, is ingratitude, and that it's very dangerous. So anyway, inshallah, we're going to break for Asr. I'll do the dari'ah tonight, inshallah. So if I didn't get to your question, if you could write it down and then just maybe give them to Fawzan, and then I'll try to get to the questions. Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Wal 'asri innal insana lafi khusr illa alladhina amanu wa 'amilu salihati wa tawasaw bil haqqi wa tawasaw bis sabr. Sadaqallahu al-'azim. They're intermediate in their vice. ثُمَّ ازْدَادُوا. And then the kufr takes over. They're advanced in their kufr. And Allah says about those people that are advanced in their kufr, right? ثُمَّ كَفَرُوا ثُمَّ ازْدَادُوا كُفْرًا لَمْ يَكُنِ اللَّهِ لِيَغْفِرَ لَهُمْ. Allah won't forgive them. Because they've reached the end. Complete kufr. And this happens slowly. It's not something that happens quickly. It happens over time. The heart gets harder. Alright, so now, where are we? فَجَعَلَ مَنَازِلَ الْإِيمَانِ وَمَنَازِلَ التَّقْوَى الثَّلَاثَةِ. So you can see the degrees of faith and taqwa are 3. كما ترى هذه 12 في 3. So now we multiply, right? The 12 by the 3. تكون 36. Now we have 36. وكل واحد من هذه 36 إما أن يتوصل إليه من طريق الاشتباه أو من طريق الهداية. And each one of these 36, you either get there through ishtibah or hidayah. You either get there because Allah yashtabi ilayka, or because yahdika. There's ishtibah and ihtida. Those are the 2 ways to get to God. The prophets have ishtibah, and some of the khawas have ishtibah, and then the other people have ihtida. And so now we have, and that's in each one of those things. وَكَذَلِكَ يَشْتَبِيكَ رَبُّكَ وَيُعْلِمُكَ مِنْ تَاوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ وَقَوْلُهُ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ يَشْتَبِي مِنْ رُسُلِهِ مَنْ يَشَاءُ وَالِاهْتِدَاءُ لِلْعُلَمَاءِ وَالْحُكَمَاءِ وهو توفيق الله تعالى العبد ليطلب بسعيه وجهده الحكمة فيتحصل له منها بقدر ما يتحمل من المشقة وإياه معنا بقوله تعالى الله يشتبي من يشاء ويهدي إليه من ينيب وقوله وممن هدينا واشتبينا فهذه 72 درجة 72 degrees of faith. لا يمكن الزيادة عليها. You cannot increase on this. ولا نقصان عنها. Nor will it be diminished. وكل ما ورد من الأخبار فليس بخارج منها. Wallahu al-muwaffiq. And everything that the Prophet has told us and the Quran has told us, you will find it in one of these 72. And so he says, فَمَا هُوَ مِن جُمْلَةِ الْعِبَادَةِ عَلَيْهِ الصَّلَاةُ وَالسَّلَامُ. So things from ibadah, the Prophet said, الْوُضُوء شَطْرُ الْإِيمَانِ. Purity is half of faith. وَقَوْلُهُ الْإِيمَانُ الصَّلَاةِ. And in another one, prayer is all of faith. These aren't negations. وَمَنْ فَرَغَ لَهَا قَلْبُهُ وَأَقَامَهَا بِحُدُودِهَا وَوَقْتِهَا وَسُنَّتِهَا وَمِمَّا هُوَ مِنْ مَكَارِمِ الشَّرِيعَةِ. And that's for the one who his soul is completely emptied of everything other than Allah, and he establishes the prayer with its correct hudud, its proper limits, in its time, and with its sunnah. And then the things from makarim al-sharia, قوله عليه الصلاة والسلام الحياء من الإيمان. Faith, modesty is from iman, or shame. They have similar, they're not the same, but al-haya can mean shame or modesty. So like I said, Arabs use words to mean more than one thing, and then sometimes they use many words for many different nuances of that thing. وَقَالَ لَا يَجْتَمِعُ إِيمَانٌ وَشُحٌ فِي قَلْبِ عَبْدٍ. You will not find iman and greed in the heart of a servant. It can't be together. وَقَوْلُهُ ثَلَاثٌ مَنْ جَمَعَهُنَّ جَمَعَ الْإِيمَانَ الْإِنفَاقُ مِنَ الْإِقْتَارِ وَإِنصَافُ الْمُؤْمِنُ مِنْ نَفْسِهِ وَبَذْلُ السَّلَامِ. And there are three things, whoever has them has all of faith. To give even when it's difficult. To be fair and unbiased with yourself. And to spread peace. بدر السلام. وقوله عليه الصلاة والسلام أكمل المؤمنين أحسنهم خلقا وألطفهم بأهله. The most complete of the believers in faith are the most beautiful in character and the most gentle with their women. وقوله لأناس من أصحابه ما إيمانكم. And he said once to some people amongst his companions, what is your faith? ما إيمانكم. What's your faith? Question. قالوا الصبر على البلاء والشكر في الرخاء ورضا بالقضاء. Patient in tribulation, gratitude in blessings, contentment with whatever Allah decrees. فقال مؤمنون ورب الكعبة. Believers ورب الكعبة ورب الكعبة. The believers by the Lord of the house. So, alhamdulillah. It's time for Maghrib. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Inshallah, may Allah make these teachings from Imam al-Raghab beneficial to all of us. May Allah give us strength to overcome our souls and become people of taqwa and iman and piety, and not people of kufr wa fusuq wa asyan. Barakallahu khairan.
Assalamu alaikum. Inshallah, we're going to break for Maghrib prayers now, and following that we'll have formal closing of the program, including a dua, and then after that, as I mentioned earlier, we'll have dinner at around 7 o'clock in the dining area, which has been set up now. You should have received feedback forms earlier today on your tables. Could you please fill those out? We really want to hear from you how we can improve for next time.